All right. So good afternoon again. This is Karen Lee Harrington from the Maine Health Data Organization, and I want to welcome you to our webinar. And there's somebody on the line who is talking. If you could just mute your phone, that would be great. So thank you for joining today's webinar to talk about the most recent changes to the rule that governs the submission of hospital data. We know everybody is very busy, so we will try and end this sooner rather than later. Please don't hesitate to use the chat feature to submit questions as we walk through the presentation. And then at the end of the meeting, we will open up the lines for questions. And anything that we may not be able to answer directly, we will follow up in writing. And this webinar will also be recorded and posted on our website. So with that, Kate, okay, super. So we want to talk through the changes to Chapter 241. We want to talk specifically about the LOS crosswalks. Then we'll move on to annual updates regarding data validation, override resets, registration information, etc. Then we'll talk about testing, timelines, and then again, we'll open it up for any questions. And again, somebody's talking with your phone not on mute, so if you could just please mute, that would be great. So changes to Chapter 241, just quickly, I'm going to go through these, and then ultimately I'm going to turn this over to Kate Mullins with our data vendor, HSRI, and she'll walk you through the substance of our presentation. So just a high-level summary, we've updated some definitions in the changes to 241. We've clarified some of the language based on feedback from several of you. We've deleted old information that's no longer applicable, updated the code list reference information, and added some fields.
Yep, you're safe.
Okay, again, sorry, if you are talking, can you please mute your phone? Thank you. And then there are some fields that have been removed. So the changes go into effect with the submission of your Q1 2020 data, which is due to the MHDO by June 30th of 2020. Our portal will be available for submissions of your Q1 2020 files by April 8th of 2020. So at this point, I am going to turn over the presentation to Kate. And again, don't hesitate to use the chat feature to ask questions as we go along, and we'll follow up at the end of the presentation. So Kate.
Thank you, Karen Lee. Okay, so as many of you have received from Kim last week, we've distributed the updated versions of Chapter 241, but again, we wanted to take today as an opportunity to highlight some of the changes of substance. So in the inpatient data, we have only one new data field. It is the billing provider NPI. So again, this is the single field that's being added to the inpatient layout. As far as deletions in the inpatient data, we are removing the entire record type 70, so it's IP 7001 through IP 7035A. And if you're familiar with this, you know this is what was the record type where ICD-9 information was being reported. At this point, everybody's transitioned to ICD-10, so we have removed this entire record type. In the inpatient data, we've also made a number of changes in addition to some clarification of language. One of the bigger changes has to do with all of the revenue code fields, where we've modified the definition to state that you need to include the leading zeros. So in the accommodation revenue codes and the inpatient ancillary revenue code fields, we are asking you to include the leading zeros. In the outpatient data file, we have a number of new fields. So we're asking for place of service. There's 3 new fields to capture that information. We've been capturing place of service in the past, but we're just trying to get some more granular information. And we've also added the rendering NPI for the rendering NPI, rendering NPI2, and rendering NPI3. In addition, like the inpatient data file, we're also adding the billing provider NPI. And again, in the outpatient data, we're removing the entire record type 70 to remove the ICD-9 fields. And similar to the inpatient data, for the revenue code fields, the revenue center code 1 through 3, we're asking you to include the leading zeros in those codes. So for those of you that submit outpatient data, you're very familiar with what we call the location of service crosswalks. What was being displayed right now is the current template that those crosswalks are submitted to us. We ask you to submit those on at least an annual basis and additional updates as information changes throughout the year. So right now, you've been submitting the code, the location name, address, line 1 and 2 if necessary, city, state, and zip code. In this coming year, we're going to make some additions to this. There's going to be 2 new columns that we're asking you to provide at the end of that template, the start date and the end date. And here on this next slide at the bottom of the screen, we've added definitions for these new columns. The start date will be the date the location began providing services. For those of you that have been submitting a location for many years, it's okay to estimate a date for this. We don't need an exact day and month as you begin to provide this information for long time locations. And the end date will be the date the location moved or stopped providing services. If the location is still active, that field will be blank. So in addition to the layout changes, that modification to the location of service crosswalk, we're also, with the 2020 data submissions, going to be doing some of our regular annual updates that some of you may be familiar with at this point if you've been submitting through our system over the last couple of years. So with those 2020 updates, we're going to be, of course, implementing the changes to the layout as well as any inpatient and outpatient validation rules that may be affected by those changes. And we'll also be doing our annual override resets and asking you to perform an annual registration information update. So the summary of the validation changes that we're going to be implemented, they very much align with the changes to the rule. So we're additions, removals, and changes to accommodate those Chapter 241 changes in both file types. And we're just wrapping up the finalization of what those rule changes will look like, and that is something we will be distributing broadly to the group in the coming days or weeks. So again, as we have done in years past, we'll be performing our annual override reset, and this means that all profile and exemption overrides that you have in place will expire as of March 30th, 2020. Submissions that occur after this reset will be evaluated against all of the validation rules, and new overrides will need to be submitted based on those results. The other annual update will be, again, on your part to review and update all of your registration information in the portal, and this will happen during the month of April 2020. You'll be reviewing and confirming or updating information in the summary screen, contacts, and user screens, and we will provide detailed instructions as we get closer to that date. It will be very similar to what happened last year. We will also be, and we'll talk about this in a minute in terms of the timeline, but we'll be having a testing period for all of these changes, and the goals will be to successfully submit inpatient and outpatient files in the new file format, review all the validation issues, determine what needs to be addressed before the submission of production files in April, and we will be asking you to successfully resolve all structural validation issues during that testing period. It is not required that all files be passed in a passing status through that testing period, but we do expect all structural issues resolved. So again, we'll be providing more detailed written instructions as we approach the testing period, but at a high level, you'll be asked to log in to a separate test portal. You'll use the same credentials as you do for the regular production portal. If there are any issues, our help desk is available to support that. You can submit any period of data less than a year old in the new format. And again, you just need to use the correct naming conventions so you don't receive a structural failure. To view the status of your file, you'll just log in and look at your submission history. The test portal does not have the automated email notifications that the production portal has, just to reduce confusion for those of you that are submitting through both systems. So the average file takes about 15 minutes to validate, so you can just check back on the status. And as I stated before, the expectation is just to resolve any structural issues if they do exist. We will not be loading any LOS crosswalks during that testing period, so you will expect to see validation failures related to those if you submit in outpatient data. And as I stated, just to reduce some confusion on system notifications that are not being sent from the test portal, so you will just have to go back and check on the status of your files once you've uploaded it. And files submitted through the testing portal will not be moved to production. And again, we'll provide detailed instructions in writing, and those will be distributed in early January. So when is this all happening, the timeline? So the Q4 2019 data files are due in the old Chapter 241 format by the end of March. The testing period for the new layout will occur from January 23rd to February 21st. Again, the goal will be for everybody to submit at least one file and get it through those structural issues. The last day for files of any period to be accepted in the old format will be March 30th, 2020. And this is really important for anybody who may be working through specific issues or resubmitting data. Really want you to try and get any of your files in and passing by March 30th. If there's a need to revalidate a file, you're going to run into issues after that date. So please reach out to us if you think you're going to be, you're working on getting data in close to that date. We can coordinate with you on the most efficient way to getting it in. So from April 1st through April 7th, files submitted will not be processed during this transition. Anything, we'll continue to accept files if you're ready to submit your files in the new format, but we will not be validating them until April 8th. And then the official start date for submissions to begin and the new layout and the submission of the LOS crosswalk will be April 8th, and that's also when the annual override resets will occur. As I mentioned, the annual registration information updates are expected to be completed by the end of April.
Medical data, I guess I don't know. I'm not sure what we can and can't give out. I wouldn't be able to want a ton of clinical detail, and I can find out.
Everybody make sure they're muted on our.
I guess it's the state of Maine, so maybe that is okay. I'm just not 100%. I'll shoot off a quick email just to make sure.
So,
right,
Kate, hold on a minute. Somebody is on the phone, and we can hear you. Please mute your phone. Thank you. Kate, go ahead.
Oh, I have it on mine. I was planning on it. I'm not sure why it's canceled on hers. Yeah, no, we do. Yep.
Kate, hold on a second.
Yes, I will.
There's somebody on the phone that needs to mute your line. We can hear your conversation. All right, Kate, sorry about that.
Okay, the final update is that your Q1 2020 data files are due in the new format by the end of June. For those of you that may have joined us a few minutes late, just a reminder, we always have these presentations available on the MHDO website. After they're completed, we'll have a recording available as well as a PDF of these slides.
Hi, Kate. I wanted to just jump in real quick.
Go ahead.
So this is Kim. There was, conflicting conversations going at the time you mentioned this, so I wanted to reiterate it just in case people didn't hear. Again, the last day to submit files in the current format is March 30th. So if you are late submitting your Q4 data, you send it, say, your files will fail because they will be in the wrong format. So it's vital that you submit Q4 no later than March 30th.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're going to open up the floor for questions on the phone. I'm also going to check the chat feature to see if anybody has submitted something there. And I don't see any questions. Would anybody like to ask a question on the line?
This is Kim again. I just wanted to throw out there to anybody has questions about the additional police service elements. I didn't know if that might have caused confusion or if people have about that. If you don't want to ask now, feel free to send us an email. Either send it to myself or the help.
All right. Well, I think since there are no questions in the chat room, and we're not hearing any questions from folks verbally. Kim, do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, I think that will do it. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. We always appreciate hearing from the hospitals that they're doing the hard work and know how these things have an impact to you. So please contact us. Thank you.
Super. Kate, all set?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.